All right, it's 9 o'clock on this Tuesday night. Welcome to our continuing coverage of President Trump's D.C. takeover, streaming live on Fox Local and on Fox 5 DC's YouTube page. I'm producer Chris, and if you've joined us at all over the last few weeks, you know the drill by now. We're recapping some of the major developments in the president's D.C. takeover from the past 24 hours, and we're also highlighting some of our Fox 5 coverage. And it's been another busy night, but we are also down to what will likely be the final hours of the emergency takeover, which is set to expire tomorrow, September 10th. And it looks like the president may be celebrating the success of his takeover because we saw him actually dine out. He went out to dinner here in D.C. for the first time since taking office, since moving back to the White House back in January. Earlier this afternoon, we heard him talking about why his crime crackdown is so important, such an important issue, especially after what happened down in North Carolina, that brutal murder that has absolutely dominated headlines. We also heard from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on the same topic. We heard from lawmakers on Capitol Hill, and this comes before they take up more than a dozen bills tomorrow that could have a major impact on how the city of Washington, D.C. is governed. And we heard from some local college students who staged a walkout on campus today, 4 universities, protesting the federal occupation. First, though, we're going to do what we always do and check the latest numbers. Take a look at the post from Attorney General Pamela Bondi. This was earlier today. Yesterday, 57 additional arrests were made, including the arrest of a juvenile for assault with intent to kill. In addition, 8 illegal firearms were seized. Make D.C. safe again. And you see on the graphic, 2,177 arrests since the federal takeover began. The federal surge began nearly 1 month ago now. 222 illegal guns seized. Now, we mentioned the president's dinner reservation. You hear the cheers for the president as he walked in around 7:30 tonight, just about an hour and a half ago now. The president, vice president, and some members of his cabinet arrived at Joe's Seafood. That's along 15th Street Northwest, just a few blocks from the White House. Now, if you were watching us last week, at 9 o'clock, the president said he had made plans to go out to eat in the city at some point. That came after he faced questions from a reporter about whether he would go out to eat in the city when he has talked about the restaurants reopening. He has talked about how safe the city is. He has talked about several friends who have gone out multiple times since the federal surge began. Now, this is actually the first restaurant that he has visited as president that isn't the steakhouse at his former hotel. Before he went in, though, he did talk to the media about the work that has been done here in the nation's capital over the past few weeks to make it safer. He also said he will announce possibly tomorrow another city where he is planning a crime crackdown. Take a listen.
Thank you very much, everybody. We wanted to take some of the members of the cabinet out to dinner to say, and here we are, we're standing right in the middle of D.C., which, as you know, about over the last year was a very unsafe place. Over the last 20 years, actually, it was very unsafe, and now it's got virtually no crime. We call it crime-free. We're going to be announcing another city that we're going to very shortly. We're working it out. The governor of a certain state would love us to be there, and the mayor of a certain city in that same state would love us to be there. We'll announce it probably tomorrow, and it's going to be something where we'll do like we did here. But this city, here I am standing out in the middle of the street. I wouldn't have done this 3 months ago, 4 months ago. I certainly wouldn't have done it a year ago. This was one of the most unsafe cities in the country. Now it's as safe as there is in the country. So we're here with cabinet members having dinner, and everybody should go out. The restaurants now are booming. People are walking. Thank you. Thank you. The restaurants now are booming. People are going out to dinner where they didn't go out for years, and it's a safe city. And I just want to thank the National Guard. We loved working with the mayor and the chief. and we all work together, and the outcome is really spectacular. We have a capital that's very, very safe right now.
So that was the president speaking to the media before he went to dinner at Joe's Seafood near the White House. You see him flanked by Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Let's take you back to the White House now, because earlier today we also heard from the president, but this was in a pre-taped Oval Office message, and he stressed the importance of making our city safe again. We also heard from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt during her weekly press briefing on the exact same topic. We're going to start with the president's message, though, speaking about law and order in American cities.
For far too long, Americans have been forced to put up with Democrat-run cities that set loose savage, bloodthirsty criminals to prey on innocent people, really very, very innocent people. In every place, they control radical left judges, politicians, and activists, and they've adopted a policy of catch and release for thugs and killers. In Charlotte, North Carolina, we saw the results of these policies when a 23-year-old woman who came here from Ukraine met her bloody end on a public train. And here's a picture of it. This is the picture of it. And this is a picture of the woman, a beautiful young girl that never had problems in life, with a magnificent future in this country. And now she's dead. She was slaughtered by a deranged monster who was roaming free after 14 prior arrests. We cannot allow a depraved criminal element of violent repeat offenders to continue spreading destruction and death throughout our country. We have to respond with force and strength. We have to be vicious just like they are. It's the only thing they understand. 24 of the top 25 most dangerous cities in America are run by Democrat mayors. 50 people were murdered in Chicago in recent weeks, with hundreds being shot. And it's time to stop this madness. The people of our country need to insist on protection, safety, law, and order. We have proven that it can be done because we did it right here in D.C., in District of Columbia. The capital of America was a bloodthirsty, horrible, dangerous place, one of the worst. And now it's a crime-free city, and we're going to keep it that way. It can be done. It can happen fast. All we want is, please, Mr. President, we need help. Chicago needs help. Other cities need help. We'll do what has to be done because we're going to make America safe again, and that includes our big cities. We're going to make those cities safe. Thank you.
Reagan.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions for you on crime crackdown.
Sure.
Democrats have tried to argue that red states have higher crime rates while overlooking problems of high crime in blue cities. I'm wondering if the president would consider working with red state governors to fix high crime in blue cities like in Memphis, Tennessee.
So first of all, I want to get to the premise of your question, Reagan, which is being pushed by Democrats, that there is crime in red states. Of course, there is crime in all states, but the crime in these cities is all in cities that are run by Democrats. If you look at the list of the top 20 high crime cities in the United States, every single one, with the exception of one in Louisiana, is run by a Democrat. And these Democrats have supported the same policies that I spoke about at the beginning of this briefing, like cashless bail. If you look at a red state, Mississippi, but a Democrat-run city in that state, Jackson, in 2019, Jackson, Mississippi eliminated cash bail for virtually all misdemeanor cases. And while Jackson is not formally a sanctuary city, the state of Mississippi formally banned sanctuary cities, and this city has acted as a de facto sanctuary city for criminals and illegal aliens since 2017. Same thing, Birmingham, Alabama, a Democrat-run city in a red state. In 2017, the Birmingham City Council unanimously passed a resolution, quote, committing to establish sanctuary policies. So if you actually look at the facts from these Democrat-run cities, these are cities that are run by Democrats and by by members of the Democrat Party. These are blue cities, and they have all supported these disastrous policies which allow repeated career criminals back onto the streets to further commit acts of violence. And so to answer your question, yes, the president wants to work with anyone across this country who wants to end these horrible policies and to bring law and order to our streets. And I think that is proven by his tremendous cooperation with the mayor of Washington, D.C. and our nation's capital. And just look at the results of that. And I do have some updates for you on the D.C. crime crackdown if anyone is interested. There have been a total of 2,177 arrests made since the start of the operation on August 7th. Just last night, there were 57 arrests made in Washington, D.C. Of the 57 arrests, there were 14 illegal aliens who were arrested, many of whom had prior criminal histories. And other arrests just last night in our nation's capital, so you all can be very grateful for this. Our great men and women of law enforcement, both federal and local, working together as they should, made an arrest on a warrant for assault with the intent to kill. The subject shot 2 adult males after an altercation. They made an arrest on a warrant for an armed carjacking. The subject assaulted an adult male in the face with a firearm and then took his keys. We also made an arrest on a warrant for simple assault and the destruction of property and subsequently charged with second-degree theft. Last night in D.C., there was an arrest for possession of a controlled substance with second-degree theft. There was an arrest for possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute. That subject, the person is also a subject of interest in a homicide and a carjacking. Last night in D.C., we also arrested a felon in possession of a firearm who was carrying that firearm without a license. So these are the career criminals. These are the bad guys that we are picking up in Washington, D.C. every day. The president would love to do this in every Democrat-run city across the country, and he hopes that more Democrats will call the White House to allow us to help them.
One more that's D.C. specific. Congress is poised to not extend Trump's federalization of the D.C. police. Mayor Bowser signed the executive order formalizing cooperation with federal forces. You just mentioned all the success that the operation has had. Does the White House believe that the Mayor Bowser's action is enough to continue the crime crackdown?
We are very grateful for the mayor's cooperation in this effort, and we look forward to continuing to work with her and the Metropolitan Police Department. Bloomberg.
All right, so that was the White House press secretary a little earlier today. Let's go from the White House to Capitol Hill now, because the federal takeover of the city's police department, that is the element that is set to expire tomorrow. That is what that 30-day takeover was all about, the DC Police Department. And as of right now, lawmakers on Capitol Hill have no plans to extend it from what we hear. However, GOP leaders are set to take up more than a dozen bills tomorrow, 14, I believe, that could dramatically change the way that DC is governed. First, though, earlier today, lawmakers, on both sides of the aisle talked about those measures and what comes next.
Something else you're going to see here in the House tomorrow. The Oversight Committee is going to be taking up all the DC crime bills. We've talked about this in the past. You've seen it. You can walk around the city, and it's actually safer today because of President Trump's action, bringing in National Guard troops. But we've seen and identified many flaws with DC ordinances. You know, when people complain about the revolving door of crime, why is it that some young kid can come and commit a carjacking at gunpoint and walk free the next day? It's because that's what the ordinances in DC allow. They actually allow soft on crime measures, so we're reversing that. We're going to be bringing bills through committee tomorrow and ultimately to the House floor in the weeks ahead, where we will make DC safe again. We will get rid of all of these ridiculous laws and limitations on law enforcement. No cash bail. Right now, if you're under 25, you can be treated as a 14-year-old if you commit a violent crime. Crimes at gunpoint, you can walk free the next day if you're under 25 years old, which, by the way, are the ages of most of the violent criminals here in D.C., and so you wonder why there's a revolving door. We as House Republicans are going to address it.
No, I'm among them, but my understanding is that the current status of it is that the Democrat mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, wisely welcomed the assistance, and she said effectively, is that the way I read that or understood it was an indefinite welcome, Matt, to keep the crime low. We all benefit from that. Every single person in this room benefits from that. You can walk home safely tonight. We couldn't have told you that several weeks ago. So no one's calling on Congress yet to act on that. And I think if you have an agreement, my understanding is an agreement between the White House and the local leadership, then I'm not sure Congress has any necessity to do anything. So we'll see how that plays out. Yes, sir.
Democrats support home rule. We support crime going down in our communities. The crime statistics continue to go down in a number of communities post-COVID. Not all of those bills are partisan bills. Some are bipartisan that will have support of Democrats. That's how we do it. We believe in community policing. We believe in local control and home rule here in D.C. Those are the elements that are going to keep the American public safe. Theatrics and militarizing big cities only governed by blue states is not the way it's done. He's not talking about crime in Cincinnati or Toledo or Nashville or in other places. He's weaponizing this issue, and that's unfortunate because Democrats believe in safe communities everywhere.
So that was just part of what we heard from lawmakers on Capitol Hill today before that session tomorrow where they plan to debate and mark up those 14 bills that could affect DC's future governance. Now, just because the emergency takeover is coming to an end tomorrow, it's important to note that the federal surge and National Guard deployment is not over yet and won't be over. The National Guard, as far as we know, will be here through November at this point. Earlier today, Fox 5's Bob Barner talked to some people living in the most crime-affected parts of DC all about that. We're going to hear from him coming up after a short break. Hang with us. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to our continuing coverage of President Trump's DC takeover, which is set to end tomorrow. Before we continue, I do want to just give a quick shout out to everyone who's tuning in on YouTube right now and joining the comment section, including Palm Beach Peter, who says he's a crazy man, but I wish Trump good things, and Slobart, who says, I love President Trump. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for weighing in. You can keep the comments coming. Now, earlier tonight, we did hear from President Trump, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, and congressional leaders from both sides of the aisle. But earlier today, Fox 5's Bob Barnard, he went down to Wards 7 and 8 here in D.C. to talk to neighborhoods, talk to residents who live in neighborhoods, I should say, that have been the most affected by crime so far this year, especially, to find out how they feel about the president's mission to make the nation's capital safe again. He also talked to some college students who staged a walkout on campus today to protest the ongoing federal occupation here in D.C. Take a listen.
The official federal takeover is set to expire tomorrow night. Over the past 30 days, in some parts of this city, it's been in your face. But in wards 7 and 8, not so much. Now, people in those wards who we've been speaking with are telling us in that part of the city, they haven't seen any federal law enforcement or National Guard troops. And while crime may be down citywide, with President Trump declaring there's no more crime in D.C. at all now, talk to people on the east side of the Anacostia River, community activists and those whose lives have been turned upside down by violence, and you'll find interesting perspectives.
I know it's hard, because in America, we go from one extreme to the other. We got to get it in the middle and come up with a balanced approach where we allow MPD to do their job and allow the community to do their job simultaneously. We can do it. It's hard, but we have to do it because we don't want nobody else in our business.
We need them everywhere, not just in certain places, not certain places where the crime is low or we just want to feel like, you know, they just need to be down by the Capitol, by the White House. We need them everywhere.
Free. Meantime, college students from 4 D.C. universities staged anti-takeover walkouts today, including this one at Howard University. We spoke to a student there who says the federal takeover has made her feel less safe in D.C.
Even I feel targeted myself, as I'm part Nigerian. I'm scared that just because of my name, or if I'm caught speaking another language, I could be stopped. I've seen the National Guard carrying around AK-47s while I'm trying to go to a museum with my friends to educate myself on contemporary art. That is not something that should be happening in this country, and I'm disgusted by it.
Now, just because the federal emergency is set to expire, don't expect that you won't be seeing any federal troops, the National Guard, on our streets any longer. They may be here through November. Those negotiations with district officials are ongoing. Guys?
All right, so that was Fox 5's Bob Barnard earlier this afternoon. Now, when the federal takeover first started several weeks ago, almost 4 weeks ago at this point, we talked about the impact it had on D.C. bars and restaurants. Earlier today on the DMV Zone, Fox 5's Marina Morocco talked to the team from WTOP Radio about how those same bars and restaurants now feel about the federal takeover coming to an end.
Now is WTOP reporter Mike Murillo. You've been following this closely. You're out on the streets. I think the bigger question, Mike, that you've been trying to figure out is how do businesses feel about this ending? Are they sad? Are they happy? How's it been?
That's a question I set out today to find out. Talked to several restaurants throughout D.C. today. Now, many of them don't want to talk about it. They don't want to get into politics. They just want to serve food. But others are willing to talk about it. I'm here at Bus Boys and Poets in the Tacoma neighborhood of D.C. And I talked to Andy Shalal, the owner there, this afternoon. And as far as he's concerned, he's seen a decline in business since the surge began, he says, back in August. He's seen it slowly spike up, but he just says it came at a very bad time for restaurants. August is traditionally a slow month for restaurants. And then you tack on, he says, you know, some of the concern that his customers had because of the announcement of the surge and the emergency declaration. That set to more people going to his more suburban restaurants, he said, but he saw a significant, well, in his words, significant, but a 5% decline in revenue in the D.C. restaurants. But the suburban restaurants did better. So he believes that could be connected to the surge here. And that's one thing he noticed as he started to look at the books since the surge began.
Yeah. You pointed out that August, as we know, historically is a terrible time for restaurants. A lot of people are out of town. They're traveling. They're not frequenting restaurants as much as they would throughout the year. We know that Restaurant Week was extended for a second week to help businesses get more foot traffic, help those revenue boosts. What do we know about the Restaurant Association of the greater Washington area? Did they see that Restaurant Week worked?
You know, from what we've heard from them, I mean, we've heard from restaurants themselves and the association, some saying that it was a step in the right direction. I think what we're seeing, though, is people not wanting to get too political on it. So you didn't see much on that. So really, that's why I set out today to talk to restaurants in particular, talk to individual restaurant owners and see what they're saying. And some who talked to me on the phone said they did see a decrease, but many of them do say they are starting to see things tick up right now. Andy Shalal saying that he is seeing that tick up as well. He thinks it's a mixture of the weather getting better, but also people getting used to what may be there. Because remember, this emergency declaration will end, but we might not see the reduction in National Guard troops or more federal law enforcement on the streets of D.C. Because all the declaration does is put the D.C. police back totally under the mayor and not over to the executive branch and the White House. So that's what we're going to see the change there. But really, driving around, you might not see that big of a difference.
Yeah, what's been your experience? I mean, you've been driving around probably from neighborhood to neighborhood. Have you really seen an increase in law enforcement?
I will say it seems to be what I've seen over the past few days and past few weeks going through D.C. And more, when you get closer to downtown D.C., you see more of that presence. When you get out to portions like this, we're on the border of Tacoma Park, Maryland, right? So you're not seeing much other than your normal patrols coming through the streets. I've seen actually more Tacoma Park police moving through the area right here on the line than I've seen D.C. police in this area. So it really just depends on where you're going. But you're really seeing a lot of that centered around the monuments, around the Capitol area, it seems, from what I've seen.
Yeah. Mike, anybody give you a resounding, this has worked for business?
You know, I've heard that from some residents. I will say, talking to residents throughout this, some believe this has worked. And you heard the White House and, of course, Mayor Bowser admitting that it has worked some. So I've heard it mostly from residents. I will say, as of yet, though, when it comes to restaurants, I haven't found any who are saying that it's helping them. And back to Busboys and Poets, he said crime wasn't a huge issue around his locations and police were able to handle everything. So he really just thinks the optics of this didn't help overall.
All right, we'll wait and see as I'm sure we'll get much more data as this all comes to an end. Mike, you can catch his reporting on WTOP on all things businesses and residents after this surge. Good to see you, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So that was Marina Morocco on the DMV zone earlier today. And as we learned tonight, President Trump dining out for the first time here in D.C. at Joe's Seafood. Coming up tomorrow, we plan to hear from D.C. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton because she plans to speak out on all of those 14 D.C.-focused bills that will be taken up by the Oversight Committee that we heard about a little earlier tonight. First, though, coming up tonight at 10 and 11, we'll have much more on the president's dinner reservation, the reaction to it, and what he said will be the announcement possibly tomorrow of the next city where he will focus his crime crackdown. Also tonight, Shamari Stone will be speaking to the family of a teenage girl who was shot and killed in Northeast D.C. back in May. That's coming up at 10 o'clock as well. For now, though, we're going to take you to Live Now in Progress. I'm producer Chris. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching all month long. We'll see you next time.